My name is Rabbi Mendel Kessin, and tonight's shir is really an abbreviated version of a much longer one. In fact, the full version so far is 15 videos. That's about 25 hours. It's a lot of hours. So I decided to make a short version, but I just wanted to know that in this version, I'm missing an enormous amount of details, obviously. But it does give you some type of a feeling what is going on. So I have included what's called many important points. However, if you really want to, what's called, really dig in, as they say, then you would watch the videos, the 15 videos, you know. So I just want to mention that. I also have a website called TorahThinking.com, which I put all my stuff. It has over probably about 300 different videos, well, 300, sure. There's a lot of, most of them are shurim on hashkafa, and I specialize in the hashkafa Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, Ramchal. And I also have probably 100 shurim on method, which is how to learn, how to think, how to organize, how to substantially increase your ability to become a tremendous Talmid Chacham. In any case, so that's where you find it. Okay. There's a lot of material I want to cover tonight, because I really have to finish tonight. That's really what my goal is, and so on, you know. So as long as I have one member in the audience still listening, I'm going to talk. It's important to know. Now, so you don't have to feel guilty if you have to go home, you got babysitters or whatever you have, and so on and so forth, you know. So I need only one to remain. That's it. Okay. Of course, that doesn't mean I'm encouraging you to leave, don't get me wrong. But I do recognize that people want to go home and you know, whatever, and get back to their kids, or they're running around the bedrooms and so on. So my goal is to finish, so I have to finish, because I need to give you a complete picture of what is happening, why, and what will happen, which is really fascinating and so on. A great deal of things I already said which will happen, have happened, which is interesting, and therefore I really have to complete the picture. I wanted to issue a disclaimer. I'm not a prophet. I just like to have prophets. But it is possible, if somebody has immersed in the area of hashkafa, that you can see what's going on. What I really want to do is give you a framework, not based on the New York Times, or any paper, or Israel, it's or whatever, but what I really want to do is give you a framework from the Torah itself. And as time goes on, you will realize that the Torah is the greatest document ever written. Of course, it was given to Moshe Rabbeinu by God himself, by the Rebbeinu Shalom. And you can find everything in that document. And you'll find that that the theoretical framework from which I say is really in the Torah. It's really in the Torah itself. So that's a very important idea, to see how great the Torah is in terms of what God has given us. I hope my objective in the shir is that you should have a tremendous chizik emunah, which is belief in God. Because a lot of people today, they don't have that, or it's severely weakened, which is obviously what goes on. And also that the main idea also which I want to disclose is that God has not abandoned the Jews at all. It's just that what he's doing is concealed. But that's really what it is, and on the contrary, what he's doing is astounding. And as you will see from these events, that he is moving us closer and closer to the Mashiach without basically anybody knowing, and there are specific reasons why, but that's really what he's doing. He has not abandoned us. On the contrary, the hand of God is throughout history, especially in the 21st century. That's really what my objective is in this particular shir. So to begin, first I want to make a statement which I said last week, Sunday, lesson tonight, and that is when we talk about the Erev Rav, which I had mentioned what they are. I just want to say that the Erev Rav is secular Zionism. It is not religious Zionism, because I specifically said the concept of an Erev Rav is a person, okay, that is basically a leader, not a follower. Jews are not Erev Rav, leaders are. But the real characterization of an Erev Rav is somebody who sins and causes others to sin with a wanton disregard of the Torah. On the contrary, he tries to influence people to abandon the Torah, which is the unique bond that the Jews have with God. It's a very important idea. That's an Erev Rav, but not a religious Zionist. Okay. Last week I had ended off in a certain way. I think I ended off with Obama. It's a favorite topic of mine. And there's certain things I want to say about before I leave Obama, just to finish up on this particular peculiar individual, and that is that the gematria of Obama. If you realize that Barack Obama, written in Hebrew, the numerical value of his name is Mashiach. Lest anybody think that he's Messiah. No, he's not. Because the gematria of Mashiach is also Nochosh, snake. And that, of course, refers to the Satan. Why does Obama have a gematria of Mashiach and Nochosh? Because he can be either one. What Obama really was, and it's amazing how he missed it. I mentioned that there are two major nations that were extant in the ancient history, in the Jewish history. One was Yishmael, the son of Avraham Avinu, and of course the second one is Esau, Edom, and I mentioned who they are in today's time. So what the Rasham really wants is that both of them should do tshuva, should repent. And he wants them to both be part of the tikkun process. That means the Jews are involved, as I had mentioned last week, and this of course is part 2, the Jews are involved in what's called the tikkun process. And I explained what that is last week. And whoever's involved in the tikkun process, not only that, but whoever assists the Jews in doing that will get reward which is incomprehensible. Everybody will do tshuva in the end. We know that, right? Because when Mashiach comes, then everybody realizes what the truth is. It's completely open. It is no longer concealed. But they don't get reward for that because obviously it is now openly revealed what is the truth. But those who assist or do the tikkun process in the darkness, the reward is incomprehensible. So what the Russian wants to do is he wants to have these two umas ha'olam, Yishmael, who are the Arabs, the Muslims, and also Edom, which is basically Christianity, Western civilization. He wants them to do tshuva before the end. And that's a tremendous merit that they have. As far as I'm concerned, Obama, he was the Mashiach of Yishmael. And I mentioned what a Messiah is. A Messiah is an individual that tries to influence the world in a major way to adopt a certain program or lifestyle. And Obama, a Mashiach being Yishmael, would be an individual who is would try to get the Arabs to back off from attacking Israel and for recognizing the greatness of Israel. And what the Russian did with Obama is very interesting. In 2008, you have to think about this. Obama was voted in. It's miraculous. The man was nobody, from nowhere. And yet he came out of nowhere to capture the hearts of the entire American people. Like I said last time, we're not talking here about an inauguration. Obama was never inaugurated as president. He was coronated as a Messiah. This was the feeling that Americans felt when he was elected. So the question is, what in the world does that mean? Because what the Russians want, and in a certain sense he was a messianic figure of Yishmael. Well, his job, and he is a Muslim, basically, and his job was to confront the Islamic world and say, hey, what are you guys talking about? What do you mean occupied territory? You don't have occupied territory. The territory that you have obviously belongs to Israel. Israel has biblical rights to this, historical rights, and they have legal rights. because the UN accepted the League of Nations appointment of Israel as being part of the Jewish nation. So what are you talking about, occupied? So he should have confronted them, remove the entire concept of a two-state solution. What does two states mean? Who ever heard of giving part of your land in order to secure peace from any nation? It's unheard of. And what he should have done is in some way confront them, but he didn't do that. So therefore he missed his opportunity. On the contrary, the first foreign prime minister, whatever, not prime minister, but first foreign leader that he talked to was Abbas, Mohammed Abbas, and which of course is absurd. And then he gave that speech in Cairo after he was elected. Obviously he failed. So therefore, he could have been a Mashiach of Yishmael had he done the job that he was supposed to do. But not only that, God gave him an incredible opportunity. He gave him, not only made him president of the United States from somebody who was nobody. I mean, what did he have? The only claim to fame was as a community organizer, which is absurd. You know, the only thing left if you're not a community organizer is to become president of the United States. You have to recognize the hand of God that this is impossible for a person. But that was his mission, which he failed. So therefore, instead of being a Mashiach, he became a Nachash, the exact opposite. Somebody who would try to backstab the Jewish people, which he did with incredible alacrity and so on. In any case, this is the concept. And the Russian did he made it easy because he gave both houses of Congress. He could have done anything. He had the wishes of the American people. He had the admiration of the American people. You see, he even had the Congress behind him. His power was awesome. And he failed. What a fool, that's all I can say, to recognize what the mission that he could have had. And that's, of course, part of his problem. He's a megalomaniac. That's part of his problem. But okay, that's his problem. In any case, but he did do a tremendous favor for the Jews. And I mentioned last week the concept of the UN, which is really the prophetic fulfillment of Goi Gomogoi. I mentioned this last week. But besides the fact that that's an acceleration of the prophecy, that Goi Gomogoi has been fulfilled, and therefore God, the Rebbeinu Shem, can now accelerate or move on to the rest of the process. In many ways, he did us a tremendous favor, Obama, by doing that, and he's not even aware of that. Because what he did is he really destroyed the two-state solution. That's really what it did. Because if the UN says that Israel occupies territory, Yehuda and Shomron, and also Jerusalem, right? So then the question is, well, what's left for Israel to negotiate? You see, because if everything that they would have negotiated and made an Arab state is now really legally, according to the UN, the state that belongs to the Arabs. So what does Israel have to negotiate? It would be very interesting if they negotiated half of Tel Aviv, wouldn't it? It means we'll give you half of Tel Aviv. That'll be the Palestinian state, which of course they can't. So therefore, unwittingly, or as an unintended consequence, the UN has destroyed the two-state solution. So we have to thank Obama for that, actually. In any case, from all this, what do we see? We see that the Satan is dying. And I mentioned that last week. We don't realize that the Satan he's almost bankrupt from all the holiness that he takes from the sins of the Jews. And therefore, what that does is makes the Satan a very desperate angel. And we don't want to get in his way, because that gets very dangerous. And not only that, but I had mentioned last week also, is that Obama is the compromise that the Satan made a deal with the Malach of Yishmael, the angel of Yishmael, to take the Kiddush of Yishmael, which I mentioned last week. What does that mean? So, if the Satan is dying, and Yishmael is dying also, how do we see this? You realize what's happening out there? It's unheard of. 8 states of the Arabs are failed states. They're dying. Which ones? We have Libya, it's dead. It's not a state anymore. Libya, we have Egypt, which is tottering because of ISIS. We have Yemen. Yemen is bankrupt. Okay. Then we have Lebanon, which is also tottering. And besides Lebanon, then of course you have Syria, which is over and done with. You have Iraq, which is over and done with, basically. You see, and then you have Afghanistan, which is basically ruled by a bunch of tribes. And even Jordan is frightened because the Palestinians who make up the Jordan population, they're going to take over Jordan, and that's the end of, what's his name, Mohammed. That's the end of his rule, because he's really a Saudi Arabia guy. He's not even Jordanian, and so on. So the amazing thing is that God has taken these people out without a bullet being fired. It's incredible. In fact, even the army has to change their tactics because there is no state that can confront Israel anymore. It's just terrorists, and that's the end of it. So we begin to see a tremendous, the hand of God, how God has removed Yishmael. So then the question is, what is the Sultan going to do? If Yishmael has died, that means he doesn't have any Kedusha left, even to give the Sultan to survive. But the Sultan is a very wily creature, very interesting individual and so on. Well, he's dying, and he's not getting anything from Yishmael because they're all dying, because their merit is also used up. In any case, so what does the Sultan do? So the Sultan goes to the file cabinet in heaven of all the Jews, because we got a big file cabinet, and he picks out the file cabinet of the sins of the Jews, you see, because the only way he can survive is by pointing out to a sin of the Jews, okay, and taking whatever kedusha, holiness that they have, and then he can be Yiboneh, he can nourish off that itself. So what's the Sultan do? He pulls out the file cabinet, and of course there's always a sin there, no question. You know what sin is always there, and he pulls it out. You know what sin that is? Lashon Hara. Jews are always slandering and bad-mouthing and defaming other Jews. Unfortunately, right? This is going to, in fact, the second temple was destroyed because of sinas chinam, baseless hatred, and we know that comes from what? Lashon Hara. In fact, the Marshal, the great Marshal, and the Chofetz Chaim say that it wasn't sinas chinam that destroyed baseless hatred, groundless hatred, that destroyed the second Beis Hamikdash. It was really Lashon Hara, which leads to that. They both say that. So what do we find? It's Lashon Hara destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. Why? Because it destroys the achdus of Klal Yisrael. Destroys the unity of the Jewish people. The Jews have to love one another. Instead, how many times do we find so many schisms among Jews and so on? So the Sultan pulls that out, and he's makatre, because that's his weapon. He prosecutes the Jews in the heavenly tribunal. That's what he does. That's what his weapon is. And he wins. Interesting. What does that mean? So his victory is astounding. What he does is that he's able to get a guy into the government of Israel that hates the Jews. And this is midah keneged midah, measure for measure. Right? That's how we always, that's justice. So the Sultan says, wait a minute, they hate each other. They're always talking Lashon Hara. Right? So you know what their punishment should be? A guy that hates them and preaches the hatred of the Jewish people, especially, mostly, the hatred of the Haredim. So all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's a guy elected, and his name is Yair Lapid. Now the whole platform of Yair Lapid is to hate the Jews, to hate the Haredim. Okay? But the incredible, how in the world did he become, how did he get 19 seats? I mean, this guy was a broadcast personality. How does that happen? Always look for the hand of God. When a guy comes out of nowhere, like Obama, it's always Yad Hashem. It's nothing more, you see. And what's his platform? Haredim. We need to destroy the Haredim because they are destroying the people of Israel. But that's the kitro. That's the prosecution that the Sultan is now trying to take because of the fact that he's dying. But wait a minute. Remember, the Sultan only takes the kedusha of the sins of the Jews. So therefore, what's Lapid's platform? 3 distinct features. 1, well, you got to get all the Haredim into the army. Guess what? Even the Israelis recognize that the army is an incredible way to secularize everybody. That's really what it is. Even Ben Gurion felt that the army is a way of getting everybody to think like an Israeli. You see, which basically called to Ben Gurion was to secularize them. So if you send all the Haredim to the army, what happens to their mitzvahs really? Obviously it's going to go basically downhill. But wait a minute, if it goes downhill and they sin, so the Sultan can take from their kedusha. So that's the first idea. Second thing, he wants to bankrupt all the yeshivas and colonels. No money, right? So automatically means all the Haredim have to go to work. Well, if they have to go to work, they'll be exposed to the secular society, and hopefully they'll sin more than what they're doing before. And as a result of that, the Sultan can now take much more food because of the sins of the Jews. And then he wants to invade the what's called the educational system, where the girls, the Beis Yaakovs, right? These are the future mothers of Israel that teach all their kids to observe the mitzvahs. And he wants to invade the curriculum of of the Beis Yaakovs. Notice all these three things have one thing in common: to minimize the observance of the Jews, their Torah. So therefore, hopefully they would sin, and then the Satan can then take from all that sinning and be unique and survive. You see. So what does the Baruch Shem do? Because the Satan is Makatre. He's a very interesting prosecuting attorney, and he doesn't take bribes. Actually, he does take bribes, but anyway. So what happens? So the Baruch Shem is incredible how he deals with the Satan. He says, okay, now Lapid is Yair Lapid, and he's really, I hate to say that, he's a satanic agent. It's really what it's all about, and so on. In any case, so what's the Baruch Shem do? Something amazing. Several years ago, after Lapid gets in, he all of a sudden has 3 teenagers that are kidnapped. Now, why these 3 teenagers were kidnapped, I don't know. But the amazing thing, what that event did, which is terrible, of course, right, is it united the entire state of Israel. You remember how much achdus there was? So therefore, what the Baruch Shem did is he went against the Ketrugim that Klal Yisrael is destroying the achdus with Lashon Hara. So the Baruch Shem created an event of 3 teenagers being kidnapped. So all of a sudden there's a tremendous amount of achdus and love. Everybody, if you remember then a couple of years ago, everybody came out. There was an unbelievable feeling of camaraderie and brotherhood among the Jewish people. In order to do what? In order to counter the prosecution of the Satan. And guess what? Shortly after that, what happened? Netanyahu kicked out Lapid out of the government. Amazing. Because he had nothing to stand on. Because once the Jews had achieved a tremendous amount of achdus, okay, that negated the prosecutions of the Satan. Very interesting. And he was thrown out of him and Livni, thrown out of the government shortly right after the incident of the kidnapping of these unfortunate teenagers. So what's the Satan doing today? Well, what he's doing today, as we will see, because his agenda is not over yet, what he's doing today is really incredible. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, the reform movement is now seeking legitimacy. They never did that before. You see, why all of a sudden are the Reformed seeking legitimacy? And we know that with the Kosel and all that. And the idea is because that's another ploy of the Satan. Because he's hoping that the Reform movement will gain legitimacy in the state of Israel. And therefore they'll be able to have the abandonment of the Torah spread throughout. And as a result of that, he's hoping that the people will join the Reform movement and so on. And they'll sin, because that's exactly what happens when you join the Reform movement. Look, the Reform movement has destroyed Judaism. They have destroyed the Erev Rav. They have destroyed Judaism in the United States. What they've done to the United States is, the Judaism in the United States is horrendous. And that's why this is another ploy. Now that Lapid is gone, and it's another ploy to get Jews to sin so the Satan can be Yiboneh, can take from that Kedusha. And that's essentially why it's happening again. But this is all part of the Satan's desire and his need to survive. That's basically what is happening. In any case, now, what is important also to know is that there's a medrash. Very interesting medrash. This medrash is a Pirkei de Rebbe Eliezer that was written 2,000 years ago. And it's astounding how accurate it is. But it's a very important medrash to keep in mind because it does foretell things that will happen. The Pirkei de Rebbe Eliezer is really Perek Lamed, the 30th Perek, and it says the following. B'achros hayomim, in the end of days, Osid Yishmuel, the Arabs, will conduct 3 wars of terror against the world. That's what it says. It's amazing that medrash that would know that the Arabs would even exist 2,000 years later, let alone that they would conduct wars of terror. It mentions 3 of them. The first one, without going into it, although I think I do mention on the tapes, is against the forest of Arabia. The second is against the sea. But the third prophecy, or the third prophetic statement of that medrash is astounding. It says that Yishmuel will conduct a war of terror against the great city of Rome. Krach Kodesh B'Noimi. That's what it says. Who is the great city of Rome today? I mean, then it was Rome, obviously, because the Pirkei de Rebbe Eliezer was written at the time of Rome. But who are they talking about? And the answer to that is something very fascinating. The great city of Rome today, if you think about it, let's take a look. Esau, the Torah says Esau. Esau is Edom, the The Torah says, Esau zu Edom. Edom is a nation. Edom is who? Edom is Rome. The Gemara says, Edom zu Romi. Edom is Rome. Rome is Christianity, and Christianity is Western civilization. The greatest city of Rome is New York City. It is the greatest city in the world, basically, I mean, there are many great cities, but New York is really where it's at, and it's a port city. Everybody enters the United States basically from New York and so on, but it is one of probably the greatest city on the planet. Let me tell you something. If you go in Manhattan at 3 a.m., you think it was 12 daylight time. It never sleeps. There's a whole night population in New York, right? And there's a day population. And you wonder, when do these guys at night sleep? But it's just, everything is open at night. I mean, it's just incredible what goes on in New York, for those who've been in New York, Manhattan especially, But New York is the Krach Kodesh Shibbolemi. And what is that medrash referring to? What is the great act of terror that the Arabs have committed against New York City? The World Trade Center. That's what it is, you see. So it predicts that there will be a tremendous act of terror against New York City, which is the great city of Rome, and so on. And then it said in the same medrash, very interesting, it says that Umikan Yitzmach ben David, from that event begins the concept of Ben David. Now whenever it says Yitzmach, that Mashiach ben David will sprout, it doesn't mean Ben Mashiach ben David, it means Mashiach ben Yosef, because he's the one who comes first. So it says that from that event what will happen is Mashiach ben Yosef will sprout. And he's going to watch. Watch what? He's going to watch as the great clash of civilizations, as the Arabs the Muslims trying to take out Western civilization, and as Western civilization will take out the Arabs. He's talking about the clash of civilizations. That's what that medrash is referring to. Okay? And then it says, and this is what the Mashiach is going to watch as this happens. And then it says, Umisham, and from there, he's going to come to Eretz Yisrael. That's what it says. Sounds like the Mashiach is American, That he comes from America, where he's going to watch that, and he's going to come to Eretz Yisrael. Anyway. But don't worry, it's not Donald Trump. In any case, this is a medrash, but what that medrash reveals, and by the way, this is also in the end of Yoel, that talks about the clash of civilizations at the same time, and at the end of Yoel, and Perek Dalet at the end, and the Malbim talks extensively about this concept, the great clash of civilizations between the Ishmael and Christianity, or Western civilization. And you should know one thing, that it's exactly what's happening today. You have there are 1.7 billion Muslims in the world, and there's 2 billion Christians. When the Muslims will reach 2 billion, that's what's going to happen. There's going to be a tremendous war of the Arabs with Western civilization, especially with Israel. There will be a final clash, because they're not going to sit down and allow Israel to exist, because the Muslims theologically cannot allow that. In fact, that's why, which is astounding when you think about that, it's impossible for Arabs to make peace with Israel. It's impossible for 3 reasons. One is that they believe that the lands that the Arabs have occupied can never be given away. So therefore, they are theologically commanded. They cannot give Israel back to the Jews, number one. The second thing is, whoever does give that will be assassinated the next day. In fact, Clinton asked Arafat, well, what's the problem? Why don't you, these guys are willing to negotiate, the Oslo Accords in September of 1993. Well, just negotiate with the guy. So you know what Arafat said? He's, you out of your mind? The moment I do that, that's it. I'm dead the next day. Because they'll kill him, which is what the Arabs will do. The third reason is also very important. Because if the Arabs negotiate peace with Israel, which means with all the countries in the United Nations, what that's going to mean that according to international law, they've recognized Israel as legitimate. So then how can they now go back and make war with Israel? So they will have enshrined the legality of the existence of a Jewish state for all time. And therefore, if they do attack Israel, Israel can attack them legitimately and legally as part of international law. So for those three reasons, it is impossible for the Arabs to make peace. It's incredible to watch how foolish people are, as if they really think the Arabs can make peace, and they can't. Of course the Arabs are not going to admit that. So they're going to obviously put some kind of condition where they're going to look good, like saying, okay, we want the 500,000 Arabs that ran away from Israel, we want them to come back, which of course is impossible because that's the end of the state of Israel. But they'll do that in order to avoid being blamed. But they cannot. Why is it? That's why peace is impossible. They have never negotiated peace. It doesn't make a difference. They cannot make peace with Israel. And therefore, it's amazing to watch how all these think tanks think that you can actually have peace with Israel. And America is under that delusion, as we will see. And that's basically why something like that can really never happen. Of course, what that Medrash is saying, basically, is that the Arabs therefore will conduct a war against Israel that I mentioned last week, the whole concept of Poras, Persia, it's Iran. That's one of the reasons why Iran is nuclear, and so on, because this will be part, and I mentioned the Medrash last week, this will be part and parcel of a clash of civilizations, where Iran is now actually part of that, and so on, In any case, so this seems to be, this is what's going on so far, okay. But there's certain other things that we really have to understand and grab a hold of. So at the present time, I want to talk about Bill Clinton. What the meaning of this individual is. In fact, really the whole Clintons and so on. But now it's not. I'm not dredging up something which happened a long time ago. No, you have to understand why Bill Clinton was president. Again, the same idea. Think about this. Bill Clinton came out of nowhere. You don't realize it's another miracle of God. I mean, here's a guy who's basically nobody. That's really, nobody ever heard of Bill Clinton in 1990 or 91. And not only that, he comes from Arkansas. Who ever heard of Arkansas? Right? I mean, Arkansas is like the 49th state. I mean, I ask forgiveness from the residents of Arkansas. But let's face it, you're just not on top. In fact, you're pretty much on the bottom. Here's a guy, Bill Clinton, comes out of Arkansas, right? He's a nobody from nowhere, basically, right? And not only that, but the man was ridden with scandals. I mean, I don't want to dredge through all the scandals and so on, but when he announced his candidacy, for the presidency of the United States in 1992, and whatever, he was filled with scandals, especially with women. I mean, I don't want to go through all the sins of this guy, but we all know what his relationship with women is. He's a womanizer, he rapes women. I mean, this came out very clearly even when Trump was running and so on. He is involved in incredible corrupt business deals. And I'm not even talking about Hillary, which is that foundation is a criminal enterprise. But it's called Clinton Criminal Enterprise, by the way. I think it's even registered in the IRS that way. But what's also amazing is that Bush, he's running against Bush, Father Bush, not son Bush, and Bush has an 88% approval rating. How in the world is he going to beat this guy? So of course the Bushman steps in and he says, no, my guy is Bill Clinton. And he beat Bush, you see. And all of a sudden this guy who came out of nowhere is now president of the United States. And the question is, why? Why would the Russian want Bill Clinton? And he performed Nissan. This guy won a presidency. That was impossible. Remind you of Obama? Same idea. Because they all had a specific mission, especially for the Jews. So imagine, God calls a council of the Malachim, because God takes counsel with the angels, as we know that from Bereshit. And he says to the angels, he says the following, he said, okay, I need a guy, right? I need a guy who's going to has a certain mission. Who's that? What's the mission? Because if you remember, September 1989 is Chatzos, creation calendar, which I mentioned last week. That's the rise of Yishmael. and so on. And therefore, there's certain things that have to start now. What is that? Well, the first thing was the first Intifada. That's really what happened that year. Before that, whoever saw an Arab, I remember in 1976, when I came to Eretz Yisrael, I went to the old city. It was astounding. I mean, the Arabs were just afraid to talk to you. You could negotiate with them. You can go into the old city. There was no fear, nothing. And then after 1989, all of a sudden, the whole thing turned topsy-turvy. Question is why? So imagine the Russian was talking to the Malachim and said, okay, I need a guy. What do I want this guy to do? In order for Yishmael to war with the West and to try to destroy Israel, which they will try to do, believe me, it's not over. There will be another war. But in any case, I need a guy that has to remove the fear that the Arabs have of the Jews. Because as long as they're afraid, they're not going to war with the Jews. In fact, they're not going to war with anybody. I need a guy that can remove the fear that the Arabs have of the Jews and even of the West. Okay, because I need that to happen in order for the final conflict to take place. Yeah, but wait a minute, how's that going to happen? The only way that can happen is if America legitimizes the Arabs. That's the only way it can happen. You have to legitimize the Arabs, you have to make them feel comfortable, and I need an American president to do that. If there's an American president that loves Arafat and Arabs, then it can happen, you see. And this is really, in the end, what it's about. Bill Clinton's mission is to remove the fear the Arabs have of the Jews, and you'll notice the incredible progression after that. Each war that the Arab had with the Jews since Clinton has removed some aspect of fear. First there was the fact that Bill Clinton has invited Arafat to the White House more times than any other foreign leader, which is incredible. You see, you put him in the Blair House, it's just amazing what the guy did. So imagine an American president doing that. Of course, what that is, he created incredible respectability and legitimacy for Arafat and for the Arab cause. So of course it gave him a new lease on life. This is what it did. And then of course you had the other wars that came after that. And finally, with the last one, 2006, right, the whole IDF, the reputation of the IDF sunk. And not only that, even though Israel has the nuclear weapon, which of course they won't reveal, right? But Iran is now going for it. So clearly you see that the Russian is allowing the Arabs to fight with Israel and the West by removing the fear. So this is what the Russian says, I need Bill Clinton. So the Malachim say to the Russian, what do you mean? How are you going to get a president to recognize the Arabs? Because the Americans have always held the Jews to be the ally. They're not going to do this. So the Russian says, watch. I need a guy, okay, that's an incredible womanizer. That's what he does. He's very good at it. Why do I need this kind of guy, right? Because this guy is going to create an incredible scandal, which he did, right? He had a relationship with a woman. I want to go into that, a tremendous scandal. And not only that, I'm going to reveal it to the world. Because the Russian is very protective of America. The presidency is not just a presidency. It's the greatest power on earth, if you think about that. And I'm going to reveal what this guy did to the entire world, you see. So what's going to happen? So this guy's going to be desperate for a legacy because he's going to be embarrassed in front of the entire world. So if he's desperate for a legacy, what's he going to do? Who are the people always around that you can make them victims of peace? The answer is the Israelis. So he's going to push Israel to the corner and make them sign suicide contracts with the Arabs. And of course, one of the greatest contracts ever signed, which is suicide for Israel, is Oslo, which I will explain, which is terrible for the Jews. But anyway, this guy's going to need a desperate for legacy because he's been embarrassed in front of the nations of the world, right? And he's going to try to force the Israelis, right? Because they're always patsies, they're always willing to abide by whatever America says, right? And he's going to not only give respect to the Arabs, but he's going to force Israel to sign documents and agreements which are terrible for Israel. And therefore, if that happens, then he can make peace in the Middle East. He gets a Nobel Prize. So his legitimacy is restored. You see. So the Malachim look at him. the Russians. This is incredible. What a plan. You actually get a president, and that's going to remove the fear of the Arabs? But wait a minute. How are you going to do that? Because this man, if he does that, right, and it's proven that he did these things, right, and you're going to have all kinds of court cases, and he's going to have committed perjury, right? So they're going to impeach the guy, and they're going to convict him in the Congress. So he'll never survive that which you want, to make the Jews back off, right, and give everything to the Arabs. So Bonsham says at that meeting, I don't have any problem. I'm God. Watch what I do. So what did Bonsham do? Something incredible. You know what that was? It's called the dot-coms. You remember the beginning of the 90s? Everybody was making a ton of money. Everybody. The dot-coms, of course today it's called the dot-goes. But in those days it was the dot-coms, right? So what the Bonsham did is astounding. He made Wall Street unbelievably successful. And therefore, nobody's going to touch Clinton. I don't care what perjury he has. I don't care what sin. No, because if they ever convicted Clinton, then the whole Wall Street would collapse. Because Wall Street hates instability in the economy. And that would make the entire Wall Street incredibly unstable. And therefore the whole dot-coms, right, it would never have survived. So Bonsham initiated that incredible period of time of Wall Street, you see, which is the dot-coms, in order that Clinton should survive. And he did. And he went on to push Israel to give up incredible amount of dangerous things that they gave out. And meanwhile, Arafat and all his minions and all everybody else there, they were killing Jews left and right. You see. So therefore, you had that happening at the same time to allow this to occur. But that was a terrible thing. First of all, Oslo. Oslo is the greatest document ever written to destroy the Jews. Why? Because imagine two people appear in front of a judge, and one guy says, this guy stole my property, he stole my car. You see? So the guy looks at the other guy and says, did you take his car? Yeah, of course I took his car. So then he turns to the other guy, did you own the car that he stole? He says, no, he owns half the car. So like the judge says, excuse me, are you crazy? If you admit that he owns half your car, then how can you accuse him of theft? You see, what the Jews did in Oslo is they admitted and acknowledged the legitimacy of the Arab claim that Arabs have a right to some aspect of Israel. That's it. You should know that is the death knell of Israel. If it wasn't for the fact that God is behind the Jews and Israel, Israel could never have gotten away from that document. But we have to thank the Arabs for always shooting themselves in the legs. You see? Because they have a document that Israel admitted that they have a chedek in Eretz Israel. That's the beginning of the two-state solution. You see? And really, al pi teva, Israel was finished. Because they would have to give up two states, which they admitted the Arabs owned. But the Bonsham, of course, was behind them. And Arafat would never accept anything from the Jews. Israel wanted to give him away. You remember what Israel was willing to give away? It was incredible what these guys were willing to give. But Arafat refused. And that's the hashgacha that he made. Arafat refused. If Arafat would have said yes, who knows where we'd be today, where Eretz Israel would be. You know, imagine a second state where the Arabs would invite all the Arabs that ran away from Israel. Of course they all want to be next to Israel because Israel is where the money is at, right? And that would have destroyed Israel because that would have been used as a base, of course, for Hamas and for Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah, right? And ISIS and so on to destroy Israel. But of course, thank God we have a Father in heaven and a King who always looks after us. So the Arabs are their worst enemy by refusing to abide by the deal. But what the Israelis did by Oslo is suicide. Because that's what it did. It recognized the legitimacy of the Arabs to Eretz Israel, which is really what the two-state solution, that's how it all started. In any case, so this is what, and Bill Clinton was part of that. He was the architect. Why? Because even though the Bonsham has a certain tachlis for Bill Clinton, but he still has bechira. He could have said this. He could have said to Arafat, excuse me, you said you're going to negotiate with Israel. Where do you come off killing Jews? What America would never do in their own country, you see? Would America allow people to kill people in America, and say nothing? Of course. Why did he confront Arafat, the Arabs, and say, how many people died, well, as Rabin used to call them, sacrifices for peace? How in the world does Clinton allow Arafat and the Arabs to kill Jews left and right? Legally, how could you not say anything to Arafat? And therefore, he didn't. Arafat kept killing Jews, and after, of course, Rabin himself was assassinated. And after, of course, Arafat, which kept on going for another 10 years, without America saying one thing. The UN said nothing, Arafat, the Clinton said nothing, and so on. And therefore, the Marshal decided to punish America and Clinton. So the Marshal is destroying Bill Clinton. You realize what's happening. He and his wife are being destroyed, literally and so on. That's a tremendous einish for what they did to Israel, that they never confronted the Arabs in terms of what they were doing was completely illegal. And that's Clinton and so on. Okay. But what's also interesting is Wall Street. Why is it Wall Street almost collapsed in 2008? Because Wall Street is the one who kept Clinton propped up. Because it was there. Wall Street collapsed in 2006, 7, and 8. Remember all the derivatives, the mortgage derivatives, and so on and so forth. Because that was an einish. Because America should have convicted Bill Clinton, and they never did. Why? Bill Clinton committed perjury. Do you know how many people are sitting in prison because of perjury? And this guy, the only thing that happened to him, and he continued as a president. Imagine a president that's committed perjury, which is a felony. Not only is he not jailed, but he's not even convicted. He was merely impeached, which is an indictment. So therefore, America, because of Wall Street, because they didn't want to disturb the money from the dot-coms, Russia punished them later on by Bush. What was that? Where Wall Street collapsed. You should know one thing. It's a miracle that Wall Street survived. I think they lost who knows how many trillions of dollars in stock value and so on. But Russia had Rahmanas in America, and he did not allow them to collapse. But that collapse in 2008 was horrendous. I mean, imagine the companies that went bankrupt. And that was a tremendous einish punishment for Wall Street. What they did is that they propped up Bill Clinton, a sitting president that has committed a felony, and everybody knows about that, and America did nothing. In any case. So therefore, that in many ways was a punishment to Wall Street, America itself. In any case, if you notice, which is very interesting, that the Marshal destroyed Hillary. Imagine here's a woman that's a head of a foundation that has hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, I once read that they have $1.2 billion in funds, which they don't really give out, and so on, right? Could you imagine, what did she need it for? Why does Hillary Clinton need to run for the presidency? She's worth an incredible amount of money. And because she ran for the presidency, what happened? Well, first of all, the Benghazi, the fact that she lied, right? And they were calling her and the State Department, please, we're being invaded, right? And she's lying by saying, well, it's the videos, it's not terrorists. And she lied openly. There's clear evidence of what she lied. So that would never have been pursued really in a serious way had she not run for the president. What she need this for? What she need this headache for? And not only that, then you have the emails, which she denied and lied again and again, and the accepting emails on a server where everybody can break into it. Nobody would have ever known about the emails if she hadn't run for the presidency. And not only that, what about a foundation? Where they discovered that the whole foundation is nothing more than a criminal enterprise. It's all bribery. It's all pay for play, right? That's classic bribery. It's funny that they don't want to use the word bribery. That's exactly what it is. In any case, so nobody would ever have known about any of this had she not run for the presidency. Why did she do it? There's several reasons. She's a megalomaniac, very evil woman, she's a pathological liar. But I believe it's because the Russians wanted to destroy her. So both her and Bill Clinton are destroyed because in terms of what she did. It's interesting to note that all the presidents that were bad to Israel, all of them were punished, each one. Especially now, when we are so close to the Messianic era. And we could start with Reagan. Reagan was a good president. He really was very good, a tremendous conservative. But if I remember correctly, Reagan recognized the PLO, and that's what legitimatized the PLO. And for that einish, Reagan was severely punished. He had Alzheimer's for an enormous amount of years. Terrible case of Alzheimer's, and so on, you know. I can see that's an einish. You don't want to recognize who the PLO, you don't want to recognize that Jews, that Eretz Yisrael is for the Jews, then I will take away your entire ability to recognize anybody. It's read the Keneged Rita. And he suffered severely for 10 years with Alzheimer's. I mean, it was terrible. His deterioration was terrible. But that's the einish to Reagan. And then you have Bush, who double-crossed Israel during the Persian Gulf War, and so on. So Bush punished him. How? Because Bush had an 88% approval rating, yet he lost the second election. You know what it is for a president not to be elected for a second term? I mean, everybody, even Obama got voted in for a second term. You see? But Bush didn't with that approval rating. That was the einish. You want to stand, because he reneged on the $10 million or $10 billion deal, guarantees, loan guarantees. Yeah, loan guarantees. He reneged on that, which is terrible. And meanwhile, Israel is suffering from all those Scud missiles in deference to America's desire that Israel should not be involved, right? They're the ones who are taking the hatchet, right? And America stabs him in the back, Bush, right? So Bush says, you want to do that? You will not be the president for a second term. And it's Bush, it's a tremendous busha. It's a busha for America, or for Bush, not to be voted in as president of a second term. Then, of course, the next president, of course, is Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton was destroyed, his reputation was destroyed in front of the entire world in terms of the scandal that he was involved with in terms of women, and now especially, and so on. So that's his punishment, and so on. And then even Bush, the son, you know, people have a tremendous mistake. They think, you know, Bush, the son, was good for Israel. He was terrible for Israel. Why? Because he forced Israel to constrain themselves. Every time, you know, every time they got bombed or missiles, was it 20,000 missiles that went to the Negev and so on and so forth? And he kept telling, no, you got to constrain yourself and so on and so forth. What a ha'ozo of a man. Would he constrain himself if they were firing missiles into New York City from Canada? Would he say, well, I'm not going to do anything? How could you do that to a nation? No nation would have tolerated that type of abuse. Yet Bush, the second Bush, forced them to restrain themselves again and again. So Hashem said, you want to do that? So what the Hashem did is the World Trade collapse happened on his watch. And he knew about it, and he did nothing. He knew what Wall Street was doing, that it would lead to an eventual collapse of Wall Street, endangering the entire economy of the United States. It was on his watch, and he did nothing. Not only that, when he left office, they hated the man. America hated Bush, and that's one of the reasons why the Piteva, not in a natural way, why Obama got in altogether. Because it wasn't only that Obama was in, they hated Bush. And that's why Hillary lost a chance for the presidency at that point, because she was part of the establishment, and they got sick and tired of the establishment. So that's an einish for Bush. Obama, well, we were just watching as they built his library, right, which I said last week, right, the presidential library in Chicago, right, and it's going to have all his legislation on display, and next to each one it's going to say, canceled, 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 right, I mean, what is he going to look like, and so on, right? That's his einish, because the greatest einish you can do from a megalomaniac is to destroy his legacy. And the bunch of is going to destroy that man in terms of the vizoin that he has done for Klal Yisrael. But in any case, we see that the Moshe is not going to tolerate a president abusing the state of Israel or the Jewish people, and so on, which is really in many ways a very important concept. Great. I just covered Bill, Hillary, Obama. Now we are up to Trump. But Trump is a different story. What does that mean? We're going to learn the Chumash. And from the Chumash itself, you're going to see that the Chumash itself predicts what will happen. And for us, it's important to understand what the Chumash says. The Torah, written 3,300 years ago, and it's going to predict what's going to happen. And therefore, you will now understand what's happening today is nothing more than a fulfillment of that prediction. How many matriarchs were there? 4. There's Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. How many patriarchs were there? How many of us were there? 3. Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Do you ever wonder why there are 4 Imos and 3 of us? Ever wonder that? Is it because Yaakov Avinu was lucky to get 2 wives? Is that what it's all about? No. Most people are not aware but that there are not only 4 Imos, 4 matriarchs, there are 4 of us. Most people are not aware of that. Yes, there are 4 patriarchs. God wanted 4 patriarchs. Now, Al Pi Hashkafa, more Kabbalistically, there are 3 major forces, spheres they're called, and the others are, and each one of these forces are personified in 4 individuals. 1 is Avram Avinu. You don't have to know just for the record. There's Avram Avinu that personifies what's called chesed, kindness, or whatever, and so on. Then there's Yitzchak that personifies another sphere called Gevura, and the way it's pictured is that chesed is on the right side and Gevura is on the left side, without getting into more details. There's another sphere called Tiferes. Tiferes is a middle between chesed and Gevura. It's located in the middle. And the one who personifies that is Yaakov Avinu. What is interesting is that, which most people are not aware of, is that Tiferes, which is in the middle, has a right and a left side. Every middle has a right side of the middle and a left side of the middle. Yaakov Avinu, although he personifies this incredible spiritual force called Tiferes, only personifies the right side of that. The left side, who personifies that? The answer is Esau. Esau is a patriarch, correct. It's astonishing. But Esau is a patriarch, and therefore there are 4. There's Avram, there's Yitzchak, there's Yaakov, and there's Esau. You see, where do we see this from? It's an astounding comment. Well, one of the places we see is the Medrash. The Medrash says that had Esau not sinned, and he did, then Yaakov would have had 6 tribes, 6 Shvatim, and Esau would have had 6 Shvatim. It's astounding. How could Esau have 6 Shvatim? And the answer is because they're both of us. That's why. Esau was the 4th of. He personified the left side of Tiferes, and Yaakov personified the right side. And therefore, the Medrash says he would have had 6. In fact, there's a commentary called the Paneach Rozo, or Rishon. In any case, he says the following. If you add up the gematria of Yaakov, and you times it by 2, it equals the gematria of Esau. And that says that had Esau done his job as being a patriarch, he would have been twice as great as Yaakov Avinu. Could you imagine what that is? We don't even understand who Yaakov Avinu was, let alone to understand who Esau would have been, right? Had he been faithful to God and to the Jewish religion and so on. So he says, therefore, that Esau, who had a much more difficult job than Yaakov, would have been twice as great. What is the job of Yaakov and Esau? Well, the job of Yaakov really is to defend the truth. But the job really is called Yeshiv Yeholam, which the Torah says. He's a dweller of tents, which means that his job was to bring down holiness to the planet, to learn Torah, and to bring down as much holiness as he can by learning Torah and doing whatever mitzvahs was extant at that time. That's why it's called the Yeshiv Yeholam, which is a description of his job. The job of Esau, however, is called Ish Sodeh, a man of the field. What is that job? It means to go in the field where all the terrible Yetzer Haras are and to remain righteous. Esau's job was called Kfir Sarah, to subdue evil, to subjugate it to holiness, by going into the field of Tumah, of sin, the nations of the world, and remaining righteous, so he would subject the evil to be under the holiness. That is both of their job. So we have Yaakov Avinu, Yoshev Ha'olam, 12 of 10, to bring down Kedusha. And the job of Esau is to do what? Is to go into the field and channel all that tumah into Kedusha, you see, by remaining righteous. That is the job of Esau. In any case, but both jobs really were centered around the concept called emes, truth. So Yaakov's task was how fast would he pursue the truth. And Esau's job was how much would he defend the truth in spite of all the tremendous temptations to go away from the truth. But in the end, they both represent truth, because the midah, or of Tferes, beauty, is truth. You see. Okay. Now that's a really startling concept. So therefore, who is subservient to who among Yaakov and Esau? And the answer is that it says when Rivka was having kids, Yaakov and Esau, so they were fighting inside. So she went to Shem or whatever to find out what's going on here. So they told Rivka certain prophetic statements. One of them is Shnei Goyim B'Vidnech. There are two nations within you, great nations, okay? And the Rav Ya'avod Tzoyer, the older will serve the younger, which means that the job of Esau, who's the older, is to serve the younger Yaakov. And together, both of them will do the tikkun, you see. So this is a very important concept, that Rav Ya'avod Tzoyer, as we will see. Okay. Now, Esau failed terribly. What does that mean that he failed? It means he became a sinner. At 13 years old, it's interesting, it says, Vayigdlu ha'na'orim, and the youths grew. But the Chumash says, that Rashi brings out, it says, Vayigdlu, and they grew. So it says that until 13 years old, you could not tell the difference between Yaakov and Esau. Could you imagine that? Yaakov the tzaddik, or the kodesh, the holy one, and Esau the rasha, correct? You couldn't tell the difference, because Esau exactly acted like his twin brother, and they're twins. And the reason why they're twins, obviously, is because they're both from Tferes. That's why they were twins. You couldn't tell the difference between Yaakov and Esau. But at 13 years old, Esau decided quits, and he became a sinner. And by the time he's 15 years old, that's when he just gave it up altogether. But in any case, Esau failed. So Esau is a tragic story. He's a tragic story of a man with the neshama, the soul of an Ov, a patriarch that failed to do his job. You see. But if Esau fails, what does that mean? Does that mean he's not part of the tikkun process? No, he's still part of it. Except his part will no longer be Ya'avoid. His job is no longer to serve the younger, but to persecute, to dominate the younger. Yes, if you remember from last week's Shir, part 1, I said that there are 3 tikkun devices. The first tikkun device is mitzvahs, the second tikkun device is tshuva, and the third tikkun device is called Yisurin, or suffering. Well, who's going to make Israel suffer? So I mentioned that there are 8 persecutory agents, you see. And therefore, Esau now assumed the major role of persecuting and subjugating Yaakov Avinu. If Yaakov Avinu refuses to observe the Torah, then Esau will become the agent of that third tikkun device. And as such, Esau, in a certain sense, is part of the tikkun device, part of the tikkun process, which, when you think about that, is amazing. So what do we have? That Esau is no longer Ya'avoid. And the Medrash says, if you look in the Torah, it says, Rav Ya'avoid Tzoyer, and the older will serve the younger. The word Ya'avoid in the Torah is not written with nekudos, right? Punctuation. So you could read the word Ya'avoid as Ya'avoid, he will serve the younger, or Ya'aved, he will subjugate the younger. The Medrash says this. You see? So therefore, Esau, which role do you want? You want Ya'avoid to serve, in which case you are part of the tikkun process, in the right way. Or Ya'aved, you want to persecute the younger in order to activate the third tikkun device, and you'll also be part of the tikkun device, so to speak, right? However, it'll be obviously a much worse job. Therefore, After Esau sinned, he became Ya'aved. And that's really what Yaakov Avinu did. When Esau came to him, and he said, do you have a blessing for me left? If you remember the story, where Yaakov stole the brachas. So Esau comes in to Yitzchak and says, okay, where's my blessing? So he says, who are you? So what do you mean, who? I'm Esau, your firstborn. So that's when it hit Yitzchak, that Yaakov stole the brachas. That's a tremendous amount of details in that event and so on. But what happened is that Esau started crying. And Yaakov and Yitzchak loved Esau. In any case. But he loved Yitzchak. Yitzchak loved Esau. And he said, okay, I will give you a blessing. What is that? That if, Yaakov will dominate you as long as he does the Torah. But if he doesn't do the Torah, he will overthrow his yoke. And obviously what that means is that you will then dominate him, and you will persecute him and make him suffer. So what Yitzchak did, which is interesting, is he maintained Esau as part of the tikkun by giving him the job of his son. You see, that's really what his mind was. So he kept his son as part of the whole tikkun process, which is interesting. But in any case, therefore we see a very interesting idea. Look, everything I'm telling you now is going to have incredible repercussions when I talk about what's happening today. In any case, so Yitzchak, so there are two parts of Esau. There's Esau before he became evil. That's called the Toiv Sheba Esau, because he wasn't evil yet. And then you have when after he became evil, when he was 13 and 15, that's called the evil Rash of Esau, the evil part of Esau. And they're two distinct personalities, by the way, as we will see. In any case, what happened next? Okay, so Esau became evil, but wait a minute. Do you remember what I said? That there are four of us. There's Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and Esau. But if Esau failed, then the question is, wait a minute, who's going to do the job of Esau? You see, somebody has to do his job. One man can, because the fact that you need four patriarchs means that there are four jobs to be done. As I pointed out, Kfir Surah. Somebody has to go into the evil environment, right? Hotel Yetzirah, so to speak, right? And withstand the temptations of the Yetzirah. Who? Esau is God. So what happened? So what God did is fascinating. It's called a contingency plan. So what he did is he had Yaakov piggyback for Esau. It means Yaakov now assumed not only his own role, but the role of Esau, which is astounding. And that's why Yaakov had to go by Lavan, because Lavan was Hotel Yetzirah. That's where the Yetzirah ruled. That's the Ish Sodeh, right? And therefore Yaakov now had to go into Ish Sodeh because he took over the job of Esau. You see, very interesting. And therefore the whole role of Yaakov changed. Well, I'm telling you now, most people are totally unaware. You see, and now you know why he married Leah, because Leah was really the wife of Esau. But since Yaakov took over his job, so therefore he had to marry his wife, you see. Because a wife always is part and parcel of the mission of the husband. It goes together. And once Yaakov, his mission was now Esau's mission, right? So he had to marry Leah, who would assist him in that mission. In any case, we get to see the incredible what the Chumash is doing. It's a whole different story, really. And believe me, I am leaving out a ton of details and so on. If anybody wants the whole story of Yaakov and Esau, it's on my website, TorahThinking.com, and it is 15 cassettes, 25 hours, on the whole story of Yaakov and Esau. But here's the problem. The problem is this. Wait a minute. Yaakov Avinu can't do this job alone. I mean, remember, because Yaakov Avinu has a different nature than Esau. So Yaakov Avinu could do his job, and he could take over some part of Esau's job. But he can't do the whole job of Esau, or else why would you need four patriarchs? So what did Moshe do? Another contingency. He said, okay, you obviously need an assist. You need another patriarch with you, but you don't need a whole patriarch. You only need a half a patriarch, a chatzi of. So I'm going to elevate a shevet, a tribe, to be a chatzi of, half a patriarch. Who is that? Yosef. There you are. This is the fundamental theme of what's going on. So Yosef now assumed the other part of Esau that Yaakov dropped. And that's why Yaakov said, when Yosef was born, he comes over to love him. And he says, okay, I'm out of here. I want to go back. I want to go into my place and Eretz Israel. What's this Mekoimi Arzi? So Arzi means I want to go back to Eretz Israel, because Lavan lives outside Israel. But Mekoimi means I want to go back to my mission, my place in terms of my mission, which is to promote Kedusha or holiness. And I want to give the other half to Yosef. That's why it takes Yaakov and Yosef both to destroy Esau. You see, that's why the Navi says, right? Beis Yaakov le'esh, for a fire. The house of Jacob will be for a fire. Beis Yosef lehova, and the house of Joseph will be the flame. And as a result of both, Beis Esau lekash. Esau will be reduced to rubble. You see, now you understand what's going on. Now you understand why Yosef had to go to Egypt, because he had become an Ish Sadeh, and I stopped at that point. In any case, now, we now understand something very important. The whole concept of what is happening in half gracious and so on. But what's important to understand is that Esau was a Chatziov. That still has a connection with the Tikkun process. It's a very important idea. Okay, now what happens? Yaakov encounters a Malach, the famous story, where he fights an angel. Who is this angel that he's fighting with? And Rashi says that this is the Sultan himself. This is not a lackey, some low-order angel. This is the Malach Sultan himself. This is the and Sultan. Why was Yaakov Avinu fighting the great angel called the Sultan? Because the Sultan was the angel of Esau. That's right. Why? Because if Esau's job is to overthrow the Sultan, that means he would have to have the same inclinations, satanic. And that's why he was so driven to do so many sins, but he had enormous strength to overcome that. In any case, so the Malach of Esau was the Sultan. Yaakov fought him, he beat him, which is astounding. And as a result of that, the Sultan, the Malach of Esau, Sarah Shel Esau blessed him, that he would be called Yisrael, and so on. But what's interesting is the next thing. And this is very, very important. And that's why I had to go into the whole concept of Yaakov and Esau. So Yaakov beats the Malach, and now he's going to meet Esau in Vayishlach. Right? And he's frightened, tremendously frightened, because Esau is coming to kill him with 400 men. You see. And Yaakov encounters Esau. That is a very unusual meeting, which has tremendous repercussions for what's happening today. All of a sudden he meets Esau, and Esau says, incredible. He says, instead of killing Yaakov, right? He says, Yehi lecha sheloch. Let that which is yours be yours. So Rashi says, what is that supposed to mean? Was he referring to the flocks? That you got flocks? Okay, you can keep your flocks. No. So Rashi says what he was referring to is the brachas. Because Esau was coming to kill Yaakov because he stole the brachas. Instead, Esau winds telling Yaakov, that which is yours, which means the blessings which I really came to kill you for, because you stole it, is yours, you can keep it. What a statement. What does that tell us? That Esau did tshuva. Esau repented. Because he could have killed Yaakov, he certainly could have tried, right? But what Esau did is he did tshuva. He said, you can keep the blessings. I'll let you have it. But that is a repentance on the part of Esau. And not only that, unfortunately, Yaakov should have realized that Esau is repenting, he's doing tshuva. And not only that, but Yaakov should have realized something else. That if he subdued the angel, the Sultan himself, who's the angel of Esau, that means he weakens the connection between the Sultan and Esau, doesn't he? Which means the Sultan doesn't have the power of Esau that he used to have, so the temptations are not as strong. His drive to sin is weakened severely. So that's number two. That Esau did tshuva with let that which is yours be yours. And the second thing he should have realized is that the power that the Sultan has in terms of the tremendous drive to do evil is severely diminished. That's number two. And number three, well, what do we do now? If Esau is ready to do tshuva, all you have to do is give him a good woman. Dinah. Dinah was a very interesting person. Dinah was she probably joined the Kiruv movement, and because there's Vatetse Dinah, Liris is Oretz, And Dinah went out to see the land. And then Shechem saw it, and he had that whole episode with Shechem and so on. What do you mean she went out to see the land? What is this, a touring? What is this, our tour guide? No. She went out, obviously, for the possibility of convincing people to serve God. I mean, this is Dinah, right? This is the daughter of Yaakov Avinu, and so on, and the daughter of Leah, and so on, Okay, so if he would have given a Dinah was called a Yatsanis. She was I wouldn't use the word, she was an assertive girl. She was a girl that could take Esau, right, and beat his brains in terms of becoming religious. So Yaakov should have realized this. Wait a minute, if Esau is ready to do tshuva, right? Because he said that which is yours be yours, you can keep the brachas. And he weakened the whole concept of the connection between the Sultan and Esau, right? All he needed was the Dinah to wrap things up. And Esau would have done tshuva. Do you have any idea what that would have done? Had Esau done tshuva? That would have been astounding. Why? Because Esau became Edom, Rome, Christianity. How many hundreds of millions of people were killed by the descendants of Esau? Instead, we would have had Esau back in the hands of the Jewish people. All his power, and Esau was incredibly powerful, right? Would have now served Yaakov Avinu. Rav Yavoid Soir. Instead of Esau persecuting Yaakov, he would have served him. And the original concept of Rav Yavoid Yatzor, that the older will serve the younger, would have come back. Not only that, you have an idea what kibbut over aim that would have been? Because what Yaakov would have done, you can imagine the incredible travail that Yitzchak had, because he loved Esau. And Esau was completely gone, right? And it was a Russia. Could you imagine the pain that caused Yitzchak? Had Yaakov brought Esau back into the fold of Judaism? Could you imagine the kibbut over aim that this would have done for Yitzchak? And you should know, one of the reasons why we suffer so much from the descendants of Esau is because of the kibbut over aim of Esau. So had Yaakov done that, it would be incredible. A mitzvah that he would have done to his father to restore Esau, right? To Yitzchak, and that what a kibbut over aim, you see. Which is interesting. So Esau would have returned back into the whole fold of Judaism. But Yaakov failed to realize. So therefore the Baruch was very angry with him, without getting the whole story. And therefore instead of giving Dinah to Esau, Dinah unfortunately was forced into a relationship with Shechem. In any case. But what do we see from this? Something very important. And you know where the Torah alludes to this, everything I just told you in one word. It's astounding how the Torah does that. Because it says when Yaakov said to Esau, okay, we can't, because Esau said, I'm not coming to Seir, where I live, right? So Yaakov said, well, I can't because of the kids, and everybody go slow, So then it says, Vayelech ledakre Seiro, and Esau went to his way to Seir, where he lived. Okay, that's interesting. It should just say Vayelech Seiro, and Esau went back home to Seir. What do you mean Vayelech ledakre? And Esau returned to his evil ways because Yaakov failed to take advantage. So the Torah, in one word, brings the whole story of what the failure was that Yaakov did. Now, don't get me wrong, we do not understand Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov is beyond what we can understand. But obviously, at some level, God held him to be culpable, guilty. That's why the whole story of Dinah arose. But from his perspective, Yaakov sinned. And don't in any way think that, and say Yaakov is like us, and so on. No. And so, which is very important to understand. But the main idea I want to bring out here is that, and Yaakov was punished with the whole story of Dinah, is that Esau did tshuva. So that what the Baruch wanted Esau is that he should be restored to Yavoid Soir, which means that he will have a part in the tikkun process the right way, and he will gain unbelievable schar, which means that in the end of time, Esau is going to do tshuva. That's right. Esau, Edom, Rome, Christianity, Western civilization, that there will be somebody who is Esau, who will do tshuva and serve the Jewish people. And you know where you see this? You see this from 5 sources. 1, the animal that represents Esau is the chazir, pig. So the Gemara says that the chazir in the end of time will become kosher. I mean, for all of you who are hankering for a slice of bacon, we are saved. I mean, for all those people that have been dreaming about ham and eggs, we're saved. The chazir will be ultimately someday become kosher. Okay. That's the good news for those people into culinary delights. Second idea is there's a medrash that says the following, that it says that in the end of time, really the end of time, it says that Esau will be in Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, right? And he's going to sneak his way to the top. You know, Esau, he's never satisfied, right? It's the old mirma, the old fraud, the imposter, right? So Esau is in Gan Eden, and he sneaks his way to the top, which means a higher seat, okay? So all of a sudden the punishment says, excuse me, you don't belong here, get back to where you belong in Gan Eden. The question we have to ask is, what's Esau doing in Gan Eden? Right? I mean, I thought he was in Gehenna or wherever the guy's supposed to be, right? In Gan Eden? Yes, because Esau became part of the tikkun process. So that's a second proof and so on. Wait. Patience, said the doctor. I need more. Head. What does that mean? Because it says, you know, the famous story that they would bury Yaakov. They left Egypt, they would bury Yaakov Avinu, right? And all of a sudden Esau shows up by the Morris HaMachpelah and he stops. He said, where are you guys going? He said, what do you mean? You want to bury Yaakov by next to Leah? He said, what do you mean? I'm a son of Yitzchak. I also want to be buried in Morris HaMachpelah. Okay, so he was obstructing the burial, which is a tremendous bizoyon. Yaakov Avinu was dead. So Hushim ben Don, he couldn't hear, he was mute, he couldn't hear. So he's looking at this guy, Esau, and he said, what's going on here? Yaakov Avinu is lying here, right? He's going to be buried. And this guy's obstructing the whole thing. So Hushim ben Don pulls out a sword. But it's interesting. He just cut off the head of Esau. Just lopped his head right off his head right off his body, right? Just cut his head off, right? I mean, that's a man of action. You know, in democracies, it would have taken committees years to figure out what to do. Well, should we kill him? Should we not? Maybe we should bribe the guy. You know, maybe we should talk to his wife. His wife can talk to him. There would be committees. You see, Hushim, no nonsense. Just lop his head right off, right? But it's interesting, which shows you who Esau was. In order for him to do that, right, he couldn't do it from the front of his head. You know, from the front. Why? Because Esau looked like Yaakov. You imagine? He looked at it because he's a twin. So Hushim could not decapitate the man, directly, because he looked like Yaakov Avinu, right? So he had to go to the back of him, and in that way he decapitated him. You see? So what happened? So where did the head go? Right? It rolled and rolled into the grave of Yaakov Avinu, and you have Yaakov Avinu, and at his foot is Esau's head. What? Esau, the Russia's head, is in the same place as Yaakov Avinu? Yes. Why? Because it's the body of Esau that's a Russia, but the head of Esau is good. That's good. And therefore it's allowed to lie together with the others. How can a Russia lie with Yaakov Avinu? Because what that means is that he's an Av, right? Or how can he lie with the others? Avram and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, right? And Yaakov and Leah. How could because Esau is an Av, and that indicates also that he will do tshuva. One more medrash, very important medrash. It says in the end of time, okay, it says that God, that the Moshe is going to take the sins of the Jews and put it on the Esau, and Esau is going to turn red. The medrash says that. It's a Yaakov, Yishayim. Okay? And then it says that Esau is going to say, I can't bear this. The sins of the Jews, I cannot bear in terms of what Esau has done for the Jews. I cannot bear their sins. So the Moshe says, and that's a tshuva. When you admit that you sinned and you cannot bear it, that is a repentance. So it says that what will God do? He's going to take the sins that's lying on the body of Esau and put it on his clothing. And this clothing will turn red. Red, obviously, with blood. You see, which lightens the burden of Esau. And then it says, because Esau still cannot bear it, that what Moshe is going to do is he's going to look at Esau and take his garments and turn it to snow white. Isn't that what we say in Yom Kippur? That we should take our garments, which is filled with sin, and turn it snow white, which means without sin. See, that shows you also that Esau is going to do tshuva in the end. The question is, what in the world does that mean? What does it mean that Esau did tshuva? With this understanding of the Chumash,
Esau.
you know what that really was? That's a different. It was Esau.
Yeah. Other
He was
country
telling me
groups
to
up.
keep talking good about me. You know, what he said is, hey, my reputation has been severely damaged, unjustly. You need to keep talking about me in a good way, right? Okay. What's happening today? And you'll begin to realize what the Chumash has been talking about 3,300 years ago. Remember the rule. Esau started out with Ya'avoid. In the end, he wound up being Ya'aved. To serve the Yaakov and now to oppress and to persecute Yaakov. Esau must return because Esau at the end did tshuva. When he said, that is a tremendous tshuva, repentance. God wants him to return. And there are many indications of that. In any case, how? Let's take a look. Let me show you something interesting. Last week I mentioned the creation calendar. What is the creation calendar? We know that. 6 days of creation, I mentioned last week, 6 days of creation, 6,000 years and so on, okay? What's pivotal is the Friday noon. Friday noon, Chatzois, is when the sun is overhead, right? And it begins to go down, never to rise again, because it's equivalent of the 5,000, the 6,000th year, Elef HaShishi, yes, right? And it's equivalent to midday, Friday, when the sun begins to set, and it's Erev Shabbos, okay. However, what is important is not Chatzois, it's not 12 o'clock noon on that day. What is important is 12 o'clock and a half hour. It's called Sheish V'Chetzi. 6 hours from Amar Shachar, from dawn, is 12 o'clock on an equinox day, okay? But you have to wait for 1/2 hour for the sun to begin to incline, because that's when you can see the shadow, that the sun is inclined, and that's when you can daven mincha, mincha doila. You have to wait for 6.5 hours after Amar Shachar, or 18.5 hours, so to speak, from Thursday night, you see? And 12.5, Sheish V'Chetzi is called, 6.5, which is really 12:30, right? That's when you can begin daven mincha, and that's begins a very important time. It's called Bein Harbayim. Bein Harbayim is afternoon, okay? And in the Novi it says, Le'is Erev Ye'or, at the time of evening, there will be light. Which means that the Messianic era is intensified tremendously at 12:30. That's when it really begins. Now, Chatzois, as I said, was 1989. September 1989 is Chatzois, is 12 o'clock. If you want to know when 30 minutes later is, what year is that? And that's the year that begins Le'es Erev Ye'or. At the time of evening, there will be light. What year is that? And the year is approximately 2008. That's right. 2008. Because it's 20 years that you add. In any case, 2008 is 6 hours from Amar Shachar, from the big dawn. 6.5 hours is the year 2008. It's interesting. We are past that. We are 2017. We even passed that. We're like 240, 241. But the question is, what happened in 2008? So if you remember what I said, which is really very important, and so on, is the concept that Obama was president. It's interesting. He was president, but in many ways what he was supposed to do, as I mentioned before, he was supposed to get Yishmael to back off. because he had all the power he needed. Everybody in America respected him. He captivated America. He had the Congress behind him. And he could have a golden opportunity to introduce truth to the world, but he didn't. So therefore, 2008, right? 2009 actually is when he began his presidency. That is in many ways the beginning of a messianic era of bringing Yishmael back. What happened? After 2 years, 2009 and 2011, what did the guy do? Nothing. So what the Baruch did something very interesting. And there are 3 events that happened in 2011, which means that the Baruch said, enough with Obama. I'm now going to bring Esau in and have him do tshuva. Okay? What happened? 1, Obama lost the Congress. He lost the House of Representatives, you see. So the power of him to do almost anything was taken away. He would have to negotiate with the House of Representatives. So he lost that in the midterm, which is basically 2011 is when the new House comes in. After 2 years, the Russian took away Congress from it, or the House of Representatives. That's the first thing. But once that is gone, and you fail to stand up to Yishmael, what happened next? The Arab Spring. The Arab Spring happened in January of 2011. You know that? It was with the guy in Tunisia. You know, this guy had 7 kids, and he couldn't make a living. He was a vegetable vendor, and some police officer came over to him, who was a woman, and said to him, "Where's your license?" He said, "I don't have it." So he said, she said to him, well, you cannot sell. He says, "What do you mean I can't sell? I'm an engineer by profession, and I can't get a job. If I don't have this, I can't support my 7 kids." You see? So she said, "I'm sorry, I don't care." So he protested, and she smacked him across his face. And for an Arab to be smacked by a woman is worse than Gehenna, you know? So what did he do? It's astounding, such an act which nobody would have suspected. The next day, I think, he went into the square, he filled himself with gasoline, and he lit himself on fire. He burned to death. In protest to what that, in protest to the whole concept of an Islamic country, that what kind of cruelty is this? That event started the Arab Spring. From that small event that nobody could ever have predicted, started the Arab Spring, okay? And it spread. Obviously, we're looking at the Arab nations are all dying because of that one incident that happened in Tunisia. That happened January 2011, the same month that Obama lost the House of Representatives. But there was something else that happened, which is astounding. Let me read you something, you know, and you see what the Russian is doing, because it's really part of the Messianic process. April 30th, 2011, which by the way is the month of Nisan, when the Geula begins. It says here, a day that will live in infamy will be held in high esteem, depending on whom you ask. Why? According to Roger Stone, longtime Trump advisor, after being humiliated in public, that is Trump, after being humiliated in public by then President Obama at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, Trump said the following. He was humiliated by Obama. There's a White House Correspondents' Dinner, which obviously Obama felt he could really wipe the floor with Trump. And Trump wasn't, you know, what was the point of that? In any case, Trump said the following. Maybe I'll just run. Maybe I'll show them all. That's what Trump said on that day. Stone said, I think that is the night he resolved to run for president. Interesting. Look at what happened in this early part of 2011. Obama loses his ability because he never took advantage of it to convince Yishmael. So he loses the House. The Arab Spring starts, because once that happened, if the Arabs are not going to back off, they must be destroyed. That happens in the same month. And right after that, in Nisan, Trump decides to run for the presidency because of Obama, who he now threw out of office. When you think about that, it's an astounding concept, because obviously what happened is that the Russian said, okay, Shmuel had his chance, and now it's up to Edom. Now I want them to do tshuva, you see. And this really, in many ways, is the introduction to what happened today, based on the Chumash. Let's take a look. Trump is a phenomenon that is beyond comprehension. What Trump did is beyond, it's really incredible. Let's take a look. Okay. On January 15th, on June 15th, 2015, Trump decides, he announces that he's running for the presidency. So everybody said, wow, we all need humor in the campaign. He's the clown, right? He's gonna win? Impossible, because he's the clown, right? But what happened? He beat out 16 presidential heavyweights. Everybody that ran against him, right, in the Republican Party, each one of them could have been president of the United States. They all were either governors or senators or men of incredible political renown. He beat them all. That's a Nes Niglo. One. Not only that, he had the media running after him. Because wherever he went, everybody wanted to hear what he has to say, because he was so unpredictable. So he had the media running, and the guy saved a fortune in money to pay for advertisements. That never happened before, because the media usually calls the shots, who wins and who loses. He was calling the shots, and the media was running after him like a bunch of jackals. That's number two. Number three, okay, everywhere he went, he had crowds, thousands and thousands of people to hear what he has to say. Again, polls, no matter what he said, he never went down. He always went up in polls. And nobody could figure out, they couldn't understand, what in the world, who is this guy? How could it be that he's indestructible? You see, not only that, he has absolutely no military experience. He has no diplomatic experience. He's not even a lawyer. And most politicians are lawyers, which is unfortunate. Because lawyers destroy everything. I hope there's no lawyers in this place.
There are lawyers here.
There are lawyers. Uh-oh, I'm getting sued. Anyway, this is the problem. By the way, you have the same problem in Israel, not with lawyers, but with generals. You notice people, when they finish with a general, then they say, okay, now I'm going to run for office. Who says you're competent to run for an office just because you're a general? You see, it's the same problem with America in terms of lawyers. And therefore, he has absolutely no experience. What are we looking at? Remember what I said? When you see a man running miraculously, who's behind that? God. This is the hand of emotion. Don't be blind. This is the hand of God. And he says, I want Trump. Why? Let's see what happens. What we're witnessing is the miracle of the rise of Trump. But it's more than that. Not only do we have the previous, everybody hates Trump. Everybody hated Trump. Who? Okay. Obama hated Trump. Right? Hillary hates Trump. The media hated Trump. Right? Fake news, they still hate Trump. But they all hate the guy. The Democratic Party hates Trump. The Republican Party hates Trump. All the liberals and the left, the progressives, they hate Trump. Right? Okay, right? And of course, Trump is not endearing himself because of his own scandals. Right? And not only that, the man is running against the most famous woman in the world, Hillary Clinton. She's the most famous woman in the world, right? It's astounding. And every statistic says that he will be slaughtered by Hillary. Well, we look back and say, forget about it. He won. I mean, it was astounding to watch. Anybody who understood Hashkafa really and understood the whole parsha of Yaakov and Esau knew that there has to be an Edomite, Esau, the Toiv Sheb Esau. Esau, before he became a Russia, has to get Edom to do tshuva. That person is Donald J. Trump. Okay, what does that mean? First, let me tell you something which is interesting. Donald Trump in Hebrew, not the J, but Donald Trump in Hebrew is the same gematria as Mashiach ben David. That's right, exactly. But that doesn't mean he's Messiah, the son of David. It's absurd. But what it means is that he is involved in the messianic process. And that's the concept of Esau, the Toiv Sheba Esau, the good part of Esau. Like I showed you, Esau did tshuva. He will be involved in the messianic process as Ya'avoid. He will serve Yaakov and not oppress Yaakov. That's number one. Number two, also you see, there are 3 psukim which I mentioned last time, but it's very important. Whenever you see a person becoming a leader, miraculously, and I pointed out all the ways that he became miraculously, that's the hand of God. You realize devotion wants him in, and there's no force on earth that can stop it. You see, America thinks that they're the ones who decide who the president is. But America forgot one thing. The only vote that counts is God's vote. Everybody else's vote is irrelevant. That's what America forgot. And God said, I am casting my single ballot for Trump. And that's all that you needed. And he became, notwithstanding all of this, which is unheard of in American history. I'm not even going into how he's governing now, but just for him to be nominated and then to be elected is beyond belief. I mean, if you remember November 9th, right? November 9th, which was Tuesday, right? At 5 o'clock p.m., they were saying, right, that Hillary was a shoo-in. It was over with, you see? And she hired the Javits Center, which is a huge center, right? And then slowly by 5 o'clock, it's amazing what God does, It's like he's getting everybody all spiked up. Wow, it's going to happen. Hillary, and they were saying she's a shoo-in, it's over with. And Obama, of course, is what's called in Yiddish kfellig. He was like, wow, I mean, my legacy is going to continue, and so on, right? All of a sudden, Florida comes in, Trump. Wisconsin, Trump. Pennsylvania, Trump. Michigan. I said, you could not believe what was happening, That whole Javits Center turned into Tisha B'Av. Instead of having this incredible joy, people were crying. It was Tisha B'Av, it's mourning, And not only that, but the media was speechless. They couldn't say anything. They had no concept, What are you realizing? I'll tell you what you're realizing. There are 3 psukim that always come into the fore when you're looking at a messianic process. What is that? The first concept is called Eved Moasu HaBoinam in Hallel. Eved Moasu HaBoinam, the stone that everybody rejects, Moasu, despises, Hoyesu L'Rosh Pino, became the seat or the cornerstone of the building. That's Trump. Everybody despised him. Number 1. Number 2, the next one. V'nahapechu. How is it going to become the cornerstone? V'nahapechu. Like Haman, when in one shot he was destroyed, overnight he becomes the selected one. That's a miracle. That's a v'nahapechu. It's the same miracle as Purim. It's a v'nahapechu. Out of nowhere, totally unexpected, he became president. Okay? And the last one, who did this? This is impossible to have done. Okay? And the answer is, the Moshe, my Kriyas Yamsov, Hisyatzvu, stand back and watch. You don't have to do anything. As Yeshua's Hashem, the salvation of God. Hashem Yilochem Yochem. God will fight for you. Atem Tachrishem. Be silent. That's an incredible, God never does that. He always wants his shtadlos at a certain level, but he never openly displays his power. And God, Moshe said to Klal Yisrael, you've done enough, that's it. Watch what I do to Egypt. This is what he said. Watch what I do to all the forces of evil, the liberals, the media, Hillary, Obama, the Democratic Party. Watch what I do to them. And you will see, I am now going to change America. And Trump is my agent. And therefore, miraculously, he comes in. Why? Because the Rosh said that in the end of time, Esau will do tshuva. And I guarantee that he is going to become a person that can do tshuva. He will change Edom. Who is Edom? America. That's the Toiv Sheba Esau, which I said last week. And it's incredible how God can withstand the vote of 320 million people. Actually, it's minus 60. Okay? Hundreds of millions of people. And God could say, My will is what dominates, not yours. And no matter what you say about Trump, everything is against the man. Everything. There's no bookie in Las Vegas that would have taken a bet on Trump. That's how bad the odds were. There were no odds. It was just impossible. And still he won, which is something that has never happened in the history of America. But we begin to understand it's the Chumash that predicts that this is what's going to be happening, and so on. Therefore, Esau, Edom, Rome, Christianity, America, Trump is now part of the Messianic process, okay? The true tikkun. In other words, America is going to assist Israel. That's what's going to happen. And as a result of that, they are going to get tremendous schar, because they are going to help the Jews reclaim their inheritance, of course, which is Eretz Israel, and the whole concept of the Messianic process. That's really what's happening. So we now understand Hillary is really a reincarnation in many ways of the evil of Esau. Esau after he became evil. And therefore the Rebbeinu Shalom is being boirer. He's selecting, he's separating the evil of Esau, Edom, and the good of Esau, which is Esau before he became evil. And that in many ways is Trump. So therefore, this is what the Rebbeinu Shalom is doing. What we begin to see is an incredible thing. You have to stand up and acknowledge the power of God. It's astounding when God wants to do something. He just does it with a little brush of his hand. Just the power of the Rebbeinu Shalom is awesome. Look what he did. In one shot, what did he do? In one fell swoop. He destroys Obama. He destroys Hillary. He's destroying the media. There's a war going on between the media and Trump. And of course the media is going to lose. He's destroying the media, he's destroying the Democratic Party, and he's destroying the liberals. What is a liberal really? You should know, a liberal is an anti-Torah person, because what it means to be liberal is prikas oil, to overthrow the yoke. Now, there's no rules or regulations, there's no mores and no traditions. You do whatever you want, that's a liberal. That's anti-Torah, because the Torah says, what are you talking about? There's a moral value system, there's ethics. And the Bushman is destroying the liberals. That is what's happening. It's interesting. As an aside, you know, the media is making a tremendous mistake. They can't win the battle with Trump. Why? They picked the wrong guy. I'm telling you now. They had no idea what Trump is. They figured he's going to capitulate to them. We'll come out with all this kind of news and so on. He'll capitulate. He's going to throw in the glove, surrender. They picked the wrong guy. Because there's a reason. Not only will Trump defend his honor and his reputation, he will not be degraded by anybody, and he's really right. And he will protect the honor of himself and his family, especially against fake news and sheker and mutzi shemra, But there's another reason. Because the media is threatening his agenda. Because he said that he wants to make America great. And if the media succeeds in bad-mouthing this guy, because they're saying he's incompetent, he's an idiot, he's crazy, right? What they're simply doing is destroying his agenda, right? And his agenda is to make America great again. He's not going to allow that. They don't realize that they have thrown down a gauntlet that is too severe. You want to say there's something wrong with it, whatever, but you cannot create conditions where his agendas are threatened. It's like cornering this person in a corner. Of course he's going to fight to the last ounce of his strength. Of course Trump is never going to allow that, because they're trying to take away his whole raison d'etre. And I want to tell you something about Trump. Trump understands that he has a mission to accomplish, which is spiritual. There was during an interview where you saw what he felt. There was an interview, a woman interviewing him and Ivanka, whatever. So she said to Trump, you're running, but what happens if you win? This was before, If you win, what's going to happen? Your business is going to suffer, because then you have to disconnect from your business and so on, So Trump said to us something very interesting. He said, how can you compare making money to saving the world, saving America? You see, my mission is to save the world, to save America. What does that sound like to you? It's messianic. All of a sudden he understands that his mission is to save the world. Not just money is irrelevant compared to that mission. So Trump has an inkling of his messianic appointment. He really does. And therefore what the media is trying to do is destroy that, you see. So not only has the revolution destroyed that, the revolution has also destroyed the Democratic Party. Do you have any idea what's happened to the Democratic Party? It's incredible. They have lost over 1,000 seats in state elections and national elections. You know how many governorships they've lost? Or representatives in state houses? Over 1,000 losses, defeats in elections. Not only that, they have no prestigious names even to represent them anymore because Hillary's gone and so is Obama. So they have no name that they can even offer to run. And besides that, in 2018, there's a tremendous amount of Democratic seats that are up for election. And they're all tremendously worried that if they lose that, then they're really finished. They lost the Congress. Not only is Trump a Republican president, not only is the Congress Republican, but for the first time, the Supreme Court will be Republican. All three will be dominated by Republicans since 1928. What a defeat of the Democrats. But not only that, there's a tremendous argument going on in the Democratic Party. On one side is Hillary and Obama trying to secure the command of the party. On the other side is Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, who are so left, right, that they even make left embarrassed. That's how left they are. You see, there's a war in the Democratic Party itself. That party is headed in many ways for perdition. But what the Revolution does is incredible. Because there's a saying, the Greeks have a saying, you know, he whom the gods would destroy, they first make mad. It's a famous, yeah, it's a Greek saying. Okay. And the Revolution has done the same thing. He whom God would destroy, he first makes mad. Why? Because instead of the Democratic Party realizing that they have to move center, because most of the country is still center. Instead, they're moving further left, which is really suicide. It's mad. Because the Russian wants to destroy the Democrat. Why? Because the way we're showing America is so fundamentally degraded and what do you call it, deteriorated in ethics and morality because of the Democratic Party. So really, when you think about it, it's amazing to see what the Russian is doing to all these evil, and in one shot, he's destroyed them. He's destroyed all of them. Now we understand also something very important. Why is there unprecedented opposition to Trump? It doesn't make sense. It's never happened in the history of the world, or the history of the United States, that there be such opposition to a president. Hey, give it up. He became president. Okay, let him rule. Let's see what he does. No. They won't give Guy a chance. Why? How do we understand the opposition, which is unheard of in American history? It has to have a reason. And you're right. The reason is spiritual. Here's the reason. By Kriyas Yamsuf, right, the Jews left Egypt. And the Russian was going to destroy Egypt. And all the Malachim knew that. And they were going to accept the Torah at Har Sinai, you see. So all of a sudden, there appeared unbelievable Din Torah, heavenly tribunal, judicial process, who the angel of Egypt gets up and says, wait a minute, you can't destroy my Egyptians. Why not? Because Jews worship idols, and so the Egyptians. So why would you want to destroy the Egyptians? Why was there such an incredible ruckus in heaven? And the answer is because God was going to destroy the Egyptians. You see, and they were going to receive the Torah. So what was really behind that was a sudden. Because once the Jews received the Torah, that's a terrible tragedy for the Sultan himself. It's the beginning of his death knell of the Sultan himself. What is happening? The Bolshevik has released Edom. Who's Edom? Edom is going to do tshuva. But wait a minute. We know that Esau, right, is the agent of the Sultan. So the Sultan is about to lose his major guy, Edom. Not only that, liberalism is dying. The Democratic Party is dying. The Sultan is dying. So guess what? The nova, when a star is about to die, it explodes. You are looking at the death throes of the Sultan liberalism and all the evil that America has done for so many years under the liberals. Therefore, intuitively they realize that they are dying and they must destroy Trump or their way of life is finished. That's why there's such opposition. That opposition that you're witnessing is satanic. I'll tell you what it is. That is why it is beyond belief what is happening. In any case, this is why. And if you look at Trump, it's very interesting. Why? Because the man's a billionaire. God made him a billionaire. Why? So he would deliver his promises? Yeah, because he's a billionaire. You can't bribe him, and there's no special interest that can even begin to bribe the man, and that's why he's a billionaire. Not only that, but he also his money is made into real estate, right? Why real estate? Because most of real estate people in New York is Jews. So he's familiar with Jews. This man knows Jews. Jews have been his partner. They work for him. Ivanka, his daughter, is Jewish. Kushner, his son-in-law, is Jewish. Then there's a guy, his chief counsel is Greenblatt, Jason Greenblatt. Even the guy he's sending to Israel is the ambassador, David Friedman. In fact, all his kids married Jews, even though they're goyim, or they're dating Jews, right? It's unbelievable. You know, if he's going to come to a bar mitzvah of his Eniklach, of his grandchildren, right? Like, what's he doing here, right? In fact, so many of his kids are going to have, and of course the non-Jews that marry Jews, their kids will be Jewish according to halacha. You see, why has God placed him in such incredible proximity to the Jewish people? Because you are going to rule, right, over America. You are going to be Esau that does tshuva. You are the Toiv Shebe Esau, Yavoid, and therefore you need to know my people. And you should know Trump is a tremendous Oiv Yisrael. The fact that they say anti-Semitism is nonsense. The man, look what happened with Bibi. And now you understand what happened with Bibi. What happened? You remember what he said? What did he do? You remember when Yaakov went to meet Esau? And what did Esau say? Yehilecha shalach, let that which is yours be yours. Isn't that what Trump said to Bibi Netanyahu? He didn't say two-state. He didn't say anything. He said, listen, it's your country. Whatever you decide is fine with me. You know, the only thing I want is peace. I don't care how you do it. Two-state, one-state, it's irrelevant. All I want is that there should be peace, which makes sense. So he said to Bibi, hey, it's your country. Just make peace, that's it. I'm not going to tell you to make two states. What Trump did is Trump said, I'm not interested in two states. I'm not interested in anything. It's your country. Just do me a favor and try to make peace with the Arabs. That's all. But that's Yehilecha shalach. Don't you realize that? That could have predicted what he would do with Netanyahu. And if you saw the picture, somebody showed me the picture, which they photographed, you know. Trump had his hand on Bibi Netanyahu, and Netanyahu had his hand on Trump. When was the last time you ever saw that? Right? It's almost like a dream. You know, Trump has his hands around Netanyahu, and Netanyahu has his hands around Trump. You know, it's like they're best buddies. You know, and of course the whole world is going crazy. The UN and the Arabs, of course. You know, why? Because the job of Trump is what? Is Rav Ya'avoy Tzoyer. Isn't that the job? He's got to serve the Jews. Right? What's happening is unbelievable. And you're looking at Trump, right? The Toiv Shebe Esau, right? The tshuva of Esau, right? You're looking at a guy who's Rav Ya'avoy Tzoyer. He's going to help the Jews. It's mamash. It's an open prophecy of the Torah. You know what I said? They can't believe that he's got his hand. They got their hands behind each other. You know, and it was so funny. The press conference where Trump is looking at Bibi Netanyahu, and somebody asked them a two-state solution, and they both look at each other and they laugh or they smile. It's almost like they have a common. They have a, it's a private joke between them, right? I mean, so what's this palsy wowsy? It's almost like brothers. You see, did you ever see Did you ever see something like that? And it is brothers. It's Yaakov and Esau returning to each other. That's what it is. You are witnessing the prophecy of what the Torah said 3,300 years ago, that they will be brothers again. That's what you're looking at. When you look at the interviews and so on, and you know That's what brothers do. They put hands behind each other. It's like, wow, where you been for 3,300 years? It's like a reunion. And so that's what it felt like, some type of reunion. This is normal. Americans don't do this. There's no priest in the United States that ever did this. Yes, but once the Bereshit stepped in, this is the Toiv Sheba Esau. And therefore, now comes the most important part of the whole Shir.
Yeah, right.
Don't leave. And you'll see why. Therefore, the task of Edom, Esau, America, Trump, who's the Toiv Sheba Esau, and he's been groomed for this. Look at the fact that he's a billionaire and he's real estate. He's been groomed. Look what the Bereshit did. He groomed him, right? And the Bereshit put him in, even though everybody hated the guy. It's astounding what's going on. But this is the task of America. One, to assist the Jews, Rav Yahweh Tzoya, both in military and trade, in every which way. One task. Second task is to allow Israel to build up for the kibbutz Goliath. We are about to enter the Messiah. You will see, as I will show you. We're getting very close to Mashiach, right? What about all those American Jews and in Europe? There's no place for them. It's astounding to watch Israel. You know, you can't afford an apartment, and you can't afford the rents, and you know, there's unbelievable amount of bureaucracy and red tape in terms of not allowing Jews to come to Israel. I'm not even talking about making a living in Israel and so on, you know. So something has to happen to Israel that's into a hachana, a preparation for the kibbutz Goliath, because eventually that's going to happen, when Jews are going to come back to Eretz Israel en masse, with or without the Jewish agency. It's going to happen, you see. So somebody has to allow the Jews to build this Trump. Now you understand why. Because Trump, which never happened before, they always restricted. Trump is going to allow building, and of course the reason why he's sort of like we're hesitating, that's because he doesn't want to jump the gun. He doesn't want to get the Arabs going crazy in the UN. So he's covering his tracks by being very, very subtle. You know, he says, well, you know, like another way he says, you know, well, you know, in the meantime, you know, in the meantime, just stop a little. You know, okay, don't build 400,000 apartments yet. Because he doesn't want to start World War III, which, you know, everybody go crazy. The Arabs, you know, and Europe, the UN, everybody's going to go crazy. So that his talk about that is classically diplomatic. But that's what his job is, to allow Israel to prepare for the kibbutz Goliath. The next third job is to protect Israel from Iran and Europe and everybody. He will protect Israel from Iran. And clearly they see eye to eye in Iran. And that's what the Bereshit wants. And he's going to protect them not only from Iran, but also from the UN and Europe. Okay. Also, he's going to neutralize the two-state solution. There will never be a two-state solution. It's impossible. You think for a moment that God, think about this, the Chumash is filled with the Bereshit saying, right, that the land is yours forever, right? How many times did the Bereshit promise the Jews? Do you think he's going to violate that which he swore to the office, Avraham Avinu? Every single tzaddik that Eretz Yisrael is the Jews, and that's my gift. The first, like Rashi says, Bereshit bara Elokim. Rashi asked the famous question, why did the Torah start with the fact that God created the world? It should start with, and this month will be for you, you know, how to calendarize the time and so on. So Rashi says, because someday the world will gang up on Israel and say, hey, Israel is not yours. So therefore God says, hey, I created the world, it's mine, not yours. I determine who I want to give anything to, and I want to give Israel to the Jews. Therefore, by divine order, biblically, historically, and legally, it's the Jews. And it's astounding how the nations of the world don't get it. It's just incredible how they will go against it. Look, I want to tell you something. There are 2 billion Christians, and they all believe in the Bible. And they know what the Torah says, that God swore that He's going to give Israel. So how in the world do they have the ha'ozah, the chutzpah, to say 2-state solutions with the Arabs You know, do you know Israel has only 10,000 square kilometers? That's all. Do you know how many square kilometers Jordan has? 95,000 square kilometers. You think that maybe there was some room in Jordan to put the Palestinians? Because Jordan anyway is a Palestinian state. Do you know how much land there is among the 22 Arab countries? 225 million square kilometers. You mean they have no other place to put the Arabs, but they gotta slice away a country that's as big as New Jersey? You have any idea when God finally exacts judgment? You have any idea what's going to happen to the nations of the world? You don't. You don't. I have always, one of the things I prayed to Rebbe Shalom, I said, God, I don't know if I'll get Elohim Haba or not. Nobody really knows. Even Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai wasn't sure if I'll get Elohim Haba. But I said, listen, when the retribution comes, get me a box seat. I prayed for a box seat. Right in front. I gotta see this. Because it's going to be something which is beyond belief. Because they openly violate, they know what God said. And they believe in the Torah. How do you do this? And not only that, they see the miraculous rise of Jews, that the Jews got back Israel after 2,000 years of exile. That is unheard of in the annals of history. That Jews, that a nation that has been in exile for thousands of years, got back their land. Unheard of. And they still don't get it. In any case, okay, so that's one. Okay, but what's really going on? Okay, he's going to move the consulate from the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Why? It's not really symbolic, because that's what it looks like. It's symbolic, right? But it's much more than that. Why? Because when he moves the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, what that indicates is that America has now become the big brother of Israel. Doesn't it? It means you guys are in my radar. I like you guys. I'm moving it for the first time, right? That means America has become the big brother of Israel. That's number one. But not only that, if that's the case, everybody's going to trade with Israel, because they're all going to curry favor with America, because they know that if they do trade with Israel, right, then America will like them and they'll be able to get trade with America. So all of a sudden, Israel is going to be on priority of every nation to do trade with Israel. But even more important, it's going to raise the stature of the Jews throughout the entire world. Could you imagine a nation of 8 million people? It's nothing. The Jews in the world are less than 1/4 of the entire world population. Yet Israel will rise among the nation, because America will show unbelievable favoritism toward Israel. Now, what's the real story of Trump? This was just an introduction. But let me tell you the real story, because you have to understand the spiritual concept of what's going on. Who's the most dangerous man in the world? Listen carefully, because you're going to be shocked. Who's the most dangerous man in the world? A man that is so dangerous that he can kill everybody on the planet. Do you know who that man is? The Mashiach. The Messiah. Yes. The Messiah is the most dangerous man in the world. Now, before you lock me up, let me explain why. You have no idea who this man is. Let me tell you a little about who this person is. The Mashiach himself, okay? His Kedusha is beyond belief. In the Pasuk it says, in Yeshayahu, okay? I think it's Memches. No, it's Nun Beis. In any case, it says the following. God says, Hine Yaskal Avdi, behold, my servant will grow wise. Okay? And there's an argument, who is this servant that will grow wise? Okay? So the Targum says it's Malkum Mashiach. It's the Mashiach. It says 3 expressions of growth, who this man is, was Mashiach. 1, V'yoram, V'nisa, V'gova Mi'oid. All expressions of incredible growth. So the Medrash says, why are there 3 expressions? So the first expression is that this man, the Mashiach, Ben Yosef, will be greater than Avraham Avinu. 1. Let's see what this Medrash says. We have no idea what Avraham Avinu was. was, what his kedusha was. It's incredible. Number 2, that's V'yorah, Esau. He will be greater than Moshe Rabbeinu. You imagine meeting Moshe Rabbeinu in the street? You would plots, which in English means you would faint. Imagine the kedusha of this man, Moshe Rabbeinu. But then there's one more expression left. The Govami Oid. He will be greater than the Malchei Ashoros, the angels themselves. Could you imagine meeting this type of person in the street? A man that's greater than Avraham, Moshe, and the angels themselves. What kind of man is this? He's a man that comes amongst us and will redeem. And here's the problem. Most people think that the Mashiach is a political figure. You know, he's going to redeem everybody, right? And he's going to save them from the exile. No, that's not what he does. What he does is he raises the consciousness of the Jewish people, of the entire world, to incredible spirituality. That's what he does. And automatically, nobody will ever touch the Jews. In fact, the Jews will be so great after that revelation that all the Goyim will want to serve the Jews. Rav Ya'avoy Tzoyer now becomes not just a miracle, the entire planet wants to serve the Jews, because they will realize that the Jews are the celebrity. They are the people of the planet, and we have to, on the contrary, we have to do whatever we can, because then maybe we can get something of what the Jews have to offer. So this is who the man is, you see. You remember Rab Shimon Bar Yochai, when the Romans went after him and he had to run into the cave? He was there for 12 years, okay? And he became the great Rajbi, Rab Shimon Bar Yochai, Meron, right? And then after 12 years, he went out, right? He went out into the, and all of a sudden, there was a guy, a farmer, and he looked at this farmer, and the Gemara says, he became a Gal Shlat Somas, a heap of bones. He killed the guy. Why? Because the Kedusha of Rab Shimon was so great that a person could not stand in his presence. So God said, oh, you're not going to kill my planet. Exactly what he said. And so he sent him back into the cave for another year. You see? But that's Rab Shimon. The Mashiach is 1,000,000 times greater than Rab Shimon Bar Yochai. So the question is, if he's that great, he's going to kill everybody. And you have any idea what he's going to reveal? That's who he is. What does he reveal? Let me tell you. The Medrash says in the end of Koheles, Medrash Rabbah, it says the following. What is the Mashiach going to reveal? What is the light, the Chokhmah, the Torah, the Kedusha that he reveals? Not just with his presence. So the Medrash says this, that all the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu, how much Torah does Moshe Rabbeinu have? Oh, no enormous amount, right? You go to a Jewish bookstore, that's all the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu, Bavli, Yerushalmi, Shas, everything. So the Medrash says that the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu, all of it, is hevel, is roof, ear, compared to the Torah of the Mashiach. Air. It has no substance. That means the consciousness rising, the spirituality, the amount of knowledge of God that this man, who himself is incredible, will reveal on the earth, is beyond comprehension. And this is before the world ends. This is the Messianic era, of which we have no comprehension. And we're talking about a man who's human, that was going to reveal this consciousness, right, at the end of time, before Olam Haba in Gan Eden. I ask you, how can the world possibly stand that type of an individual? They can't. The Mashiach will destroy the planet. What is God going to do? So what God does, he has to prepare the world for the entry of Mashiach. You know, we pray every day, Mashiach should come, of course, but there has to be a chana, or else we're finished. Now, for more of the details, you can listen to the videos, but let me tell you just one of them. Moshe Rabbeinu, Egypt. The Jews in Egypt needed preparation because they were about to leave Egypt and face God. And Moshe Rabbeinu was the Mashiach, almost. So where was the preparation? So the 1 year that the Jews suffered, or rather the Egyptians suffered from the Maccas, all the plagues and so on, that at the same time was a plague to the Egyptian and an unbelievable revelation to the Klal Yisrael. They grew in unbelievable spiritual stature after a year, because the Maccas took place 1 year. That was preparation 1. Preparation 2 was Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the sea, when it says that even a Hebrew maidservant saw more than Yecheskel, Hanovi, the Yechezkel Ma'aser Merkava is the foundation of Kabbalah. She saw more, which is unbelievable. This is the Achona. And then the next Achona, number 3, was the 49 days before they stood at Har Sinai. And guess what? They still died. They died. The Medrash said they all died. Why? Because the revelation of who God is was the same level as the Mashiach revealed in the Messianic era. That's what it was. So you can imagine what kind of achana? So the question is, where is this? How could this be true? You see. And the answer is very interesting. And I'll tell you what the answer is. God must prepare the Jewish people, in fact the whole world, for the entrance of not just this man, but the rising of consciousness, which is unbelievable, it's unparalleled, the rising of consciousness, which we cannot even begin to understand, as it says in the Novi, Timon Oretz Deo, that the earth will be filled with the knowledge of God. As the waters covers the seabed, that's how much presence of God will be known. We can't even comprehend what kind of revelation that will be. How is he going to do it? So the way he's going to do it is you need to have, a time of incredible peace and prosperity and tranquility. And America will provide that. Trump is going to make America great again in order to prepare an incredible time so that people will not be persecuted and they will have decent livings. And in that climate, something will happen. And that is really miraculous. But you have to understand one thing. Without going into it, I can't go into length. But the Mashiach right now is alive, as far as I'm concerned, but he's paralyzed. And I don't mean paralysis physically. He cannot do what he can do. You talk about a man that has that capacity to be greater than the angels, that cannot in any way exhibit his spirituality as a prisoner, you see. And therefore, what's going to happen is when the time comes that he can be released from that jail, and there's a reason why he is paralyzed, in order that's an atonement for the Jews. He will be slowly released, and he will begin to be to come out, and people will begin to recognize that this guy, wow, he certainly sounds like a Messiah, right? And at the same time, since he is being released slowly, you see, then the Jews also will begin to have a much greater consciousness, and this will be miraculous, you see. In other words, the Jews will experience an incredible spiritual rise of incredible consciousness. In Kabbalah, it's called Moichin. They will begin to understand the truth, and the rest of the world will understand that also, and so on. Which is, and therefore, that is really the purpose of Esau. It's not just Esau to become, to do the tikkun, of course, but the real concept is the concept of the tikkun itself, the messianic process. The messianic process is really the entry of an individual, right, whose presence is beyond belief, and whose awe, whose consciousness is beyond belief. That needs to have achona. God cannot bring this man and kill the world. He won't do that. The world has to have the preparation, and so on. And Trump is part of that preparation, because America has to become great, and therefore that kind of prosperity and tranquility will go throughout the world in many ways, and therefore the Jews will be able to, in some way, and that's miraculous, that's unknown. But I'll tell you one thing, like God says in the Chumash, and I will pour forth my spirit on all flesh. What is that? That's the awe of the Mashiach. And that is miraculous, because to this day, nobody knows how that will happen. Because right now, the Jews are terrible. I mean, 11 million Jews are gone. How God is going to yank these guys out of the tumah that they're in, and the rest of the world is beyond comprehension. But the whole Messianic era is beyond comprehension. But it will happen soon, you see. And America is part of that. And Trump is also part of that, unbeknownst to him. And I'll tell you something. Trump needs a spiritual advisor. He has no idea what his mission is and what's about to take place, and so on. But let me tell you an interesting concept. Take a look at the American flag. Take a look at the word Jerusalem. You ever see, how do you spell Jerusalem? J-E-R, U-S-A-L-E-M? Did you ever notice that USA in the middle of Jerusalem is USA? Yeah. J-E-R, USA, L-E-M. Right? So Jerusalem achieves its incredible tikkun with the aid of America, the USA. That's number one. Number two, the American flag, interesting flag. So everybody thinks, well, 13 stripes are the 13 original colonies, right? And the 50 stars are the states and so on and so forth, right? And right? Not really. The 13 stripes are the 13 shvatim, tribes of Israel, right? 13 tribes, right? What are the colors of this flag? It's red, white, and blue, right? So white and blue is Jews, Israel, and red is Esau. And what will be the achievement? The 50 stars, the 50 gates of wisdom or Kedusha, that both of them have to achieve. It's an interesting drasha. Anyway, but I want to tell you something also. It's happening. The rise of Trump is a miracle which we have never seen before. That's what it is. This was impossible. Impossible. I want to tell you something. Even Trump knows it's impossible. And believe me, they know that it's only the hand of God, but they haven't figured out why. Why does God want this and so on? We know because it's all about Rav Yahweh Tzoya, that the Russian wants Esau to help the Jews bring in the Messianic process. But the way Esau will contribute it is how? By having tremendous peace and tranquility and prosperity, and to stabilize the world. It's like Abraham Lincoln said, America is the last great hope of mankind. Interesting, this was 1855, whatever. Trump is going to stabilize the world, because all you need, the greatest blessing God can give to any nation is to have a beneficent and wise monarch, because he can do whatever he wants. And the worst curse God can give is a monarch, a king, that is evil and is only interested in self. And Trump, because of what he is, he's going to make America great, and the whole world in many ways will enjoy that, in order for there to be a climate that the real spirituality can really happen. And that's really what is about that, or what is really about to happen, and so on. So therefore, we are very close to the Messianic era. Don't fool yourself. We are very close because we are witnessing miracles all around. Ask yourself, when was the last time you saw a nation of 8 million people be a world leader in agriculture, water conservation, high tech, security, cybersecurity, medicine, right? I don't even, this is Israel. Did you ever see anything like that? Israel, 8 million people should be a world leader in so many different areas. This isn't the know-how or the brilliance of the Knesset. Don't even get to think that way. This is the Rebbeinu Shalom, who loves Jews, who loves Israel, that wants to prepare the rise of stature of Israel among the nations of the world. And that's what it is. And Trump is going to put what they say, the cream on top of the pudding, because in many ways, and that's really what it is. It's a brother that has returned to a brother in many instances. And that picture is really what it's all about. So you have to get ready. What are you supposed to do with your lives? Think about ruchnius. That's what it's about. Don't wait. Think about spirituality, whatever you can. Devote time to Torah, to mitzvahs, you see. Because when the Mashiach comes, there is no more free will, because then it's obvious, you see. And the last thing you want to be saying when the Mashiach arrives, and you didn't follow my advice, you're going to be saying to yourself, there was this Rabbi Kessin. I should have listened to him. You don't want to be saying that. In any case, this is what's happening. I hope I've introduced the whole 21st century. Just incredible what's going on. And like I always say, Russian is an incredible chess player. That he moves a pawn, and nobody sees what's happening. And that pawn is responsible for an unbelievable messianic event that can happen 100 years from now. And I want to tell you something, there's an enormous amount they've left out. If you want to see much more of it, then I advise you to go to my website. Also, I have the 20th century, which is another 9 hours of what happened in the 20th century. But in any case, I wish everybody a lot of luck, and we should be zoich to see the Mashiach this year. And by the way, the gematria, when the Russian said, because this is the forerunner of Mashiach ben Yosef. Pokoi Yifkoi. I have surely remembered the cries of my people in Israel. That's what it says, you know. And when Yosef HaTzadik was about to die, he said, Pokoi Yifkoi, remember me and take me out of Egypt. So those are the two magic words. Pokoi Yifkoi, you know. Pokoi Pokadti. I have surely remembered. That is the introduction of Mashiach. And the gematria of Pokoi Pokadti is 778. Just put a 5 to that. 5,778. So it takes time to get rid of the opposition, Trump to get rid of the opposition, and let's hope that this year or next year, Mashiach will be coming. Amen. And, thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Rabbi, for educating us and giving us this valuable information.